Hi everyone! Welcome back to my channel, Trash to Teach.
Today, we're diving deep into one of the most powerful virtualization platforms available on Windows, Microsoft Hyper-V. Whether you're an IT professional looking to build a home lab, a developer who needs multiple test environments, or just someone who wants to safely experiment with different operating systems without affecting your main computer, this complete guide will get you up and running with Hyper-V from absolute zero. At the end of this video, you'll have a fully functional virtual environment where you can run multiple operating systems simultaneously, create snapshots for easy rollbacks, and build complex network scenarios. Before we jump into the setup, let's make sure your system can actually run Hyper-V effectively. This isn't like running a simple application. Virtualization has some specific requirements. First, hardware requirements. You'll need a 64-bit processor with second-level address translation, or SLAT support. Most modern Intel and AMD processors have this, but we'll check to be sure. For RAM, I recommend at least 8 GB, but honestly, 16 GB or more is where you'll really be comfortable. Each virtual machine you run will consume its own portion of RAM, so more is definitely better here. Now for the operating system, and this is important, Hyper-V is not available on Windows Home editions. You need Windows Pro, Enterprise, or Education. If you're running Windows Home, you'll need to upgrade or consider alternatives like VirtualBox. You'll also need virtualization enabled in your BIOS or UEFI settings. This might be called Intel VTX or AMD-V, depending on your processor. Don't worry, I'll show you how to check and enable this. First, let's check if your processor supports the necessary virtualization features. I'm opening PowerShell as an administrator. Look for these lines in the output. If any of these show no, we need to address that. The most common issue is virtualization enabled in firmware being disabled. Here's another quick way to check. Let's use this command. If this shows disabled, that's actually expected right now. We haven't installed Hyper-V yet. But if it shows an error about your system not supporting it, then we have a problem to solve. Look for settings called Intel VTX, Intel Virtualization Technology, AMD-V, or SVM mode, and make sure they're enabled. Save and exit, then we can continue. Now let's enable Hyper-V. There are several ways to do this, but I'll show you the most reliable methods. Method 1. Using the Windows Features dialog. Press Windows key plus R, type Optional Features, and hit Enter. Scroll down and find Hyper-V. Check the box next to it. Notice it has subcomponents. You want to enable the full Hyper-V option, which will automatically select all the necessary components. Click OK, and Windows will download and install the Hyper-V components. This might take several minutes depending on your internet speed. Method 2, and this is my preferred method because it's faster, using PowerShell. This command does exactly the same thing as the GUI method, but it's much faster and gives you better feedback about what's happening. When either method completes, you'll need to restart your computer. Don't skip this step. Hyper-V requires a reboot to properly initialize the hypervisor. Go ahead and restart now. I'll see you after the reboot. Welcome back. Now that Hyper-V is installed, let's open Hyper-V Manager. You can find it by searching Hyper-V in the Start menu. This is your command center for managing virtual machines. Let me walk you through the interface. On the left, you have the Hyper-V Manager tree. This shows your Hyper-V host, that's your physical computer, and any virtual machines you create will appear here.
In the center, you see details about whatever you've selected on the left. Right now, it's showing information about your Hyper-V host. On the right is the Actions pane, which changes based on what you have selected. These are all the things you can do with your currently selected item. The key actions we'll be using today are New for creating virtual machines and virtual switches. Settings for configuring your Hyper-V host. Virtual Switch Manager for setting up networking. Before we create our first virtual machine, we need to set up networking. This is crucial and often overlooked by beginners. Click on Virtual Switch Manager in the Actions pane. This is where we define how our virtual machines will connect to networks. You have three types of virtual switches in Hyper-V. External switches connect your virtual machines to your physical network. This means your VMs can access the internet and communicate with other devices on your network. Internal switches allow communication between virtual machines and your host computer, but not to the outside network. And private switches only allow virtual machines to communicate with each other, completely isolated from everything else. For most scenarios, you want to start with an external switch. Let's create one. Click New Virtual Network Switch. Select External and click Create Virtual Switch. I'll name this External Switch. Very creative, I know. The important setting is External Network. Make sure this is set to your physical network adapter. You'll get a warning that says this might disrupt network connectivity temporarily. That's normal. Click Yes to continue. Perfect. Now we have a virtual switch that our VMs can use to access the internet and our local network. Let me create one more switch, an internal switch for lab scenarios where we want isolation. Click New Virtual Network Switch again, select Internal, and create it. I'll call this one Lab Network. This internal switch is perfect for creating isolated lab environments where you can test things like domain controllers, DNS servers, or other infrastructure without affecting your real network. Creating your first virtual machine. Now for the fun part, creating our first virtual machine. Right-click on your computer name in the left pane and select New greater than Virtual Machine. The wizard opens with a Before You Begin page. You can check Do Not Show this page again if you want, then click Next. Give your VM a descriptive name. I'm going to create a Windows 11 test machine, so I'll call it Win11-test. Notice you can choose where to store the VM files. By default, they go in C:"program data, \Microsoft, \Windows, \Hyper-V, but if you have limited space on C drive, you might want to change this to another drive. Here's an important choice. Generation 1 or Generation 2. Generation 1 VMs use older BIOS-based boot and are compatible with older operating systems. Generation 2 VMs use UEFI boot and have better performance and security features, but only work with newer operating systems. For Windows 8.1, Windows 10, Windows 11, or modern Linux distributions, choose Generation 2. For older operating systems, stick with Generation 1. I'm selecting Generation 2 for my Windows 11 VM. Now we assign memory. This is RAM that will be dedicated to this virtual machine while it's running. For Windows 11, I recommend at least 4 GB, but 8 GB is more comfortable. I'll set 8,192 megabytes. Notice the Use Dynamic Memory checkbox. This is fantastic. It allows the VM to use only the memory it actually needs, up to the maximum you set. Definitely enable this unless you have a specific reason not to. For networking, select the external switch we created earlier. This will give our VM internet access. Connect virtual hard disk page. Now we create the virtual hard disk. This is where the VM's operating system and files will be stored. For Windows 11, I recommend at least 64 gigabytes, but I'm going to set 80 gigabytes to have some breathing room. The disk will start small and grow as needed, so don't worry about it immediately using all that space. Here's where we tell the VM how to install the operating system. You have several options you can install later. Boot from a CD, DVD, boot from a floppy disk. Yes, really. Boot from a network-based installation server, or, most commonly, install from an ISO file. Browsing for ISO file, I have a Windows 11 ISO file downloaded from Microsoft, so I'll select that option and browse to my ISO file, completing the new virtual machine wizard. The summary page shows all our choices. Everything looks good, so I'll click Finish to create the VM. Excellent. Our virtual machine now appears in Hyper-V Manager and it's ready to boot up. Installing an operating system. Let's start our VM and install Windows 11. Right-click on the VM and select Start, or just double-click on it. The VM console window opens and we can see it booting from our ISO file. This works just like a physical computer booting from a DVD. The Windows 11 installation starts normally. I'll speed through the basic installation steps since this isn't specifically about Windows installation. While this installs, let me show you some important VM management features. Right-click on the VM and select Settings. This is where you can modify the VM's hardware configuration even after creation. You can add or remove hardware, change memory allocation, add network adapters, configure security settings, and much more. One of my favorite features is checkpoints. These are like snapshots of your VM at a specific point in time. You can create a checkpoint, make changes to your VM, and if something goes wrong, instantly roll back to the checkpoint. Make sure integration services are enabled. These provide better mouse integration, time synchronization, and other quality of life improvements. Our installation is finishing up. Once Windows is fully installed and we're at the desktop, there are a few important post-installation tasks. Great! Windows 11 is running in our virtual machine. Now let's optimize it for the best experience. First, let's check Device Manager to make sure all devices are recognized properly. Most everything should work out of the box with modern Windows versions and Generation 2 VMs. Run Windows Update to get the latest drivers and security updates. This is especially important in virtual machines. Hyper-V offers Enhanced Session Mode, which provides better integration between the host and VM. If you see a prompt about this, go ahead and enable it. Enhanced Session Mode allows you to resize the VM window and have the resolution automatically adjust, copy and paste between host and VM, and redirect local drives and devices. Now that we have a clean, updated Windows 11 installation, let's create our first checkpoint. This gives us a pristine restore point. Right-click on the VM in Hyper-V Manager and select Checkpoint. I'll name this Clean Windows 11 Install. This way, I can always return to this state if I need to start fresh. Perfect. The checkpoint appears under our VM. We can create multiple checkpoints and easily switch between them. Let me share some advanced features and best practices that will make your Hyper-V experience much better. For memory management, dynamic memory is usually your friend, but understand how it works. The VM starts with a minimum amount of RAM and can grow up to the maximum as needed. Set your minimum to what the OS needs to boot, 2 GB for Windows 11, and your maximum to what you can spare from your host system. For processors, you can allocate multiple virtual processors to a VM, but don't go overboard. A good rule of thumb is no more virtual processors across all VMs than you have physical cores. For storage, Hyper-V offers different disk types. Fixed-size disks provide consistent performance but take up the full amount of space immediately. Dynamically expanding disks start small and grow as needed, perfect for testing and development. Smart paging helps when you overcommit memory across multiple VMs. It uses disk space as temporary memory when needed. Speaking of multiple VMs, let me show you how to manage multiple virtual machines efficiently. You can create additional VMs using the same process, or even faster, you can export an existing VM and import it with different settings. Always monitor your host system's resources. Running multiple VMs can quickly consume RAM and CPU, and that's a complete guide to setting up Hyper-V. We've covered everything from checking system requirements to creating and optimizing virtual machines. Make sure your system meets the hardware requirements. Always create external virtual switches for internet connectivity. Use dynamic memory to efficiently share RAM between VMs, create checkpoints at important milestones, monitor your host system's performance. I've put links in the description to download Windows ISOs, additional Hyper-V documentation, and some great resources for building home labs. If this video helped you set up your virtual environment, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more IT tutorials. I'd love to hear about what you're planning to do with your new Hyper-V setup, so drop a comment below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.